Lupus LA would like to thank our generous sponsors for their support of the Your Story, Our Fight podcast. Gemini Beauty believes in beauty for a cause, and in their case, the cause is lupus. The team at Gemini is changing the skincare game for good. We thank GSK for their focus on autoimmune disease and their continued support of Lupus LA. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Lupus LA podcast, Your Story, Our Fight. I'm your host, Adam Selkowitz, and thank you to our sponsors, GSK Pharmaceuticals and Gemini Beauty, for always supporting our telling of these lupus stories. It's so important. And Alicia Evans is here today. Alicia is a mom of twins, had symptoms really early, and then was really diagnosed after the birth of your twins. So I think that's really interesting. And I know you've been touched by Lupus LA in a lot of ways, and we're going to talk about that down the road. But welcome to the podcast, Alicia.
Thanks so much for having me today, Adam. I really appreciate this and allowing me to get my story out, and hopefully I'll be able to help other people too.
Of course. And that's honestly what this whole podcast is about, is really, I think we've done over 70 episodes now, 60 or 70 episodes. And it's amazing to me how different everybody's story is, but also how many similarities everybody's story has. And I know what you've got to share is really going to help a lot of people. So tell me a little bit about where you grew up, what you were doing, how these symptoms started when you were younger.
So I grew up in Iowa, and it's
you may be the first podcast person that we've had on, the first podcast guest that's was born in Iowa. So there you go.
Well, it's kind of a larger city, Iowa City, but not as quite as popular as in the movies, which is Des Moines. But I grew up in Iowa the first 15 years there, and I had symptoms when I was younger, but it's so hard to diagnose any disease state like this. I had GI issues, horrible GI issues. I had fainting spells in my front yard. And no one could
What age were you when you had those?
Probably, I would say like 8 years old. And the pediatrician would just tell my mom, have her drink more water, and was never really able to figure out anything or diagnose it. And then I moved out here when I was 15, almost 16. And, I was just going about my routine, and I would just get so fatigued all the time. And I just couldn't figure it out. And it wasn't until I actually got a real job, I would say, and had medical insurance that I went to the doctor. And then I would just say, can you do blood work? Can you test me? They would test my thyroid, do the blood work. Nothing came out positive. And so they were just like, well, it's stress, it's depression. Take this, do this. And again, nothing definitive at that point.
And what was the career you were on? What was that path that you were, what was the job?
So I majored in consumer affairs, minor in marketing. And I ended up in sales. And so in sales, it is stressful at times. Inside sales, outside sales. And so there were times for me that were more challenging, because obviously stress too induces flare-ups. And I had no idea what I had. So here I am just thinking, okay, well, maybe it is all in my head, but it actually wasn't.
No, for sure. And I mean, sales is one of those jobs too, where you really have to be on. I mean, you always have to be on. And I think that's, we've spoken to some other lupus patients in your position, and I think it is such a hard thing to do, to get yourself ramped up, especially when you don't know what your diagnosis is.
Yeah, well, there was a job that I had. I don't know if I'm supposed to name companies or not. So I'll just,
why not?
Okay. So working for,
or you don't have to if you don't want to.
When I was working for Mattel, I had one of my bosses, he was just like, how come you get ready some days and some days you don't? And it's like, well, That's a good question too. It's like some days I just do not have the energy to do my hair or makeup or get dressed. I would love to. I would absolutely love to every single day. It makes me feel better, makes everyone feel better. But there are days where I'm just like lucky if I get a shower.
Yeah, that's tough. And you still, at this point, you don't know what's wrong with you, right? So, and everybody's telling you it's psychological or stress, et cetera. So then what changed in terms of your approach to getting this diagnosis?
I've always been just kind of fearless and persistent, and I just don't give up. I really don't give up on anything. And so I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to keep on going. And it's funny because then moving right along, I changed jobs and I was working for Pfizer, and I had several doctors who I would call on and say, do you have Graves? Do you, because my eyes are so, pronounced and big. And so that hadn't even really occurred to me either. But again, I tried to get more blood work done, tried to do the testing, and it wasn't, like you said, a lot of people are diagnosed finally with the birth of their child, or in my case, children, because twins. Mm-hmm. And I just felt like it was such a hard, long road, not knowing why I'm getting sick, why I'm so tired, why I can't go out in the sun, all these questions. And for me, because it took so long and I was looking for an answer, when I finally got a diagnosis, I was just relieved. I'm like, well, mm-hmm. Thank God. And now I'm to the point where when I get other diagnoses, I'm just like, okay, whatever. Just adding to my members only jacket.
Right. So tell me what changed. So after, because I think this is an important point, because the lupus is discovered in a lot of women post childbirth, and I don't know that we've ever really talked about it in depth enough. But what changed in your body? What happened to your symptoms post childbirth?
So post, I should say during childbirth, I had issues and I was on bed rest, and I could totally tell, like I could tell every single at a time when something was wrong. And I told the OBGYN, I said, something's happening here. She's like, no, everything is okay. And lo and behold, I get preeclampsia. And so, of course, it was supposed to be a scheduled cesarean. And then I have to go in for an emergency cesarean because they're like, your blood pressure's up. I had pitted edema. I was swollen. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have any help at that time because everyone was expecting me to have the babies 2 weeks later. And I was freaking out. There was a lot of stress. Things were just going on. And, so they delivered the babies early. I went in and they delivered them that day. They gave me a round of magnesium sulfate. They still couldn't get my blood pressure down. So I was in the hospital for a while until they could get it down. And then once they released me, thank God, I had a nurse come check on me at my home. And she said, oh my God, you have to go back. You have to go back to the emergency room. My blood pressure was 200 over 100.
That just happened to another friend of mine who knew she had a lupus diagnosis, but also had preeclampsia and also went home from the hospital and had the same former podcast guest, actually. Very scary.
So I avoid hospitals like the plague because I'm immunocompromised anyway. And I'm like, no, I don't want to go into a hospital. I hate them. I would do everything but go into a hospital. And I'm like, okay, fine. So my husband drives me to the OBGYN and then she's like, no, you need to go to the emergency room right now. She could have a stroke or a seizure. So then he's like, well, can she drive herself? Because we have these 2 little newborns, they're twins. And it's like, right. We don't have anyone that can help us right now. So we ended up going to the emergency room, and I said, look, you need to get my blood pressure down, and you need to get it down now. I don't have the luxury of staying here. So they put me on medication. I didn't tolerate the magnesium sulfate well. So I said, I do not want this again. It caused, vomiting, hallucinations. My body just did not react to it in a positive way.
Mm-hmm.
So they kept me there that day, and then they released me on medication, and they put me on high blood pressure medication, which to me is crazy because I've always had low blood pressure. So when you ask what happened, it was like, okay, so my kidneys were giving out. My blood pressure sky high. My nails were spooning because I had anemia so bad. Finally, with the test results, I had low red blood cell, low white blood cell, low platelets, just everything.
Everything out of whack.
Everything was out of whack. Finally, a positive ANA. And I'm like, really happy, but I shouldn't be. But I'm like, yes, something. So finally, this is exciting. This for me is great news.
And had you known about lupus before? Had lupus crossed your mind? Had it crossed anybody's mind? Had the conversation happened, or was the word completely new to you?
It's been so long ago that I honestly, I don't even remember, but I knew about lupus. Yeah. Because one of my neighbors had lupus. So, and she was actually thinking, she's like, oh, you have fibromyalgia and you have this and that. And which was actually true, because at first he diagnosed it as mixed connective tissue disease. And it wasn't until later on where every little sore, every cut, scrape turned into just like this pussy infection type thing. And then I got shingles, and I had to remove the twins. I couldn't have them with me. Things just started going crazy and going downhill. So yeah, he said fibromyalgia, mixed connective tissue disease. But then after the other stuff happened, he's like, no, it's lupus. But then kept on adding on other diagnoses. So
as we all get, right? Yes. All right, listen, we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and talk about, now that you know you have lupus, how has that changed your life, and what's that experience been like? So we're going to take a quick break. We will be right back with more from Alicia Evans.
Lupus LA's Facebook Live Chat series connects leading lupus and health experts with our community to answer the most current and important questions. For more information, visit lupusla.org.
We are back on the Lupus LA podcast, Your Story, Our Fight. We're talking to Alicia Evans. And when we took our break, you had just been diagnosed following the birth of the twins. So you have this new diagnosis now. You come home from the hospital. I assume they get the blood pressure under control. What is that like at the same time you're dealing with newborn twins and this new diagnosis? I know you said relief, but were you able to find treatment? Were you able to start getting more stabilized fairly quickly, or was it kind of a mess for a while?
It was a mess for quite a while, and the diagnosis wasn't immediate either. So again, I had to get the labs, and then I got one diagnosis, and then he's like, okay, well, maybe it is just lupus, but then added other things. So with that.
And was this a rheumatologist at that point?
It's a rheumatologist.
So somebody,
yes.
So an OB referred you to somebody, or okay?
Well, so Dr. Solomon Faruzash used to be one of my call-ons when I worked for Pfizer, and then I called him up and I just said things are crazy, something's going on. So I came into him, and that's when I got the blood work done, and then more blood work and x-rays of hands and feet and knees, because at the same time I couldn't sit to go to the bathroom when I was pregnant. So I had no idea that I was having an arthritis flare up at the same time. And it's just like, are you kidding me? So I have osteoarthritis and rheumatoid arthritis. There's so many things that I didn't expect every time I went into the office to have another diagnosis or to have something else. But at the same time, I mean, it's good. It's a relief.
Mm-hmm. How does that affect your being a new mom to twin?
I guess then you figure out what are you going to do for it? And what medication are you going to take, and what will relieve the symptoms and what won't? And sometimes my body reacted to certain things and sometimes it didn't. It's almost like it's I don't know how to describe it, but most people, certain medications would work for them. For me, it wasn't always the case. And so it was all kind of trial by error to see what would work. Like Plaquenil, he was hoping that would give me energy, but it didn't really give me energy. And the side effects for me, I figured I didn't want to have to go in and monitor my eyes. And you know, that was another appointment in addition to the appointments that I had for my girls and for myself already. So it was just like hit or miss. I remember taking methotrexate and I couldn't tolerate the pill form. So then I had to get the needles and the Sharpies box and the medication and give myself the injections. And that was hard. And so were the side effects. The side effects were horrible. So then I tried Enbrel, Humira. Gosh, the list just goes on. And now I'm trying not to take a lot of medication because I want to save it for when I get older. So
Right. I haven't heard that before. Okay, that's good. I like that.
No, you think about what all these medications do to your bodies and the side effects that they have and the long-term ramifications. So I'm just trying to hold out as long as I can because I feel like I've taken a lot of medication, and then having to take steroids every year. Sometimes, like during COVID, I ended up on 3 steroids in 1 year, and that's a lot. That's a lot on your body. It's a lot mentally because you gain so much weight. Everyone's like, "Oh my God, you're so big." And then like when I lose the weight, they're like, "Oh, you've lost a lot of weight. You look great." And I'm like, "Okay, well, it's not my choosing."
Right.
So it can just be really tricky to find the right course and the right path. And now with the arthritis flaring up too, I'm just trying to figure out, okay, what can I eat or what can I take that's going to help with that so that I don't have to take medication.
So tell me, go back to sort of this experience with a new kids, a lupus diagnosis. I assume you weren't working at the time you had the babies, or you were on maternity leave, or so did you tell me kind of the path your life took once the lupus diagnosis was there.
So I was on maternity leave, and at the same time, the girls were about 4 months old, and I was trying to get them diagnosed because I knew that there was something going on with them. So I was working with Westside Regional Center and trying to deal with my own symptoms. So I had appointments, like I would say every week, if not every single 2 weeks, but it could have been every week at the time. I mean, to the point where Dr. Fruzesh was calling my kids his grandbabies. And they would come into the office with me, and then Josie would blow up like a glove as a balloon for them to play with. I mean, it's really sad, but this was my life, trying to juggle, the girls and myself. And I would just say it was really hard. It was really exhausting. I cracked numerous teeth. Just very stressful. And I was supposed to go back to work. That was the goal. And finally, after the diagnosis and just getting sick, and it was one thing after another. I mean, I would get the flu, a cold, shingles, you name it, something would happen. It was just like, okay, I'm to the point where I'm only good like 2 weeks out of the month. What am I supposed to do? And I was trying to go back to work. And then finally my husband and I just decided, you know what, it's not going to work out. And
And how does that make you feel emotionally? Like, how does that, after you've put in so much time into your career, How does that hit you?
It's really hard. You have all these dreams and goals. And I mean, just thinking about the future, I would always plan. I'd have plan A, plan B, plan C. But this wasn't one of those options. I'm just like, are you kidding me? In my wildest dreams, I would have never imagined that. I didn't get long-term insurance, because who would think at like age 30, you're going to get sick and it's going to affect the rest of your life. Literally every aspect of your life, your energy, what you can do with your family, what you can do as far as taking care of the house and the bills and paying for stuff. And, it's just, it kind of turned my world upside down, because I was just like, I don't know what to do. It became.
And tell me now, so how old are the girls now?
They're 17 now.
They're 17. So this has obviously had just an enormous lasting impact on you. How has it affected their lives?
I got upset, and I talked to a friend about it, and I said this, I wanted to be able to go back to work so that we could have better vacations. And, sometimes we don't have a vacation, or sometimes it's local because I don't have the energy and I can't fly. And I wanted, I wanted to be able to provide more for my children and to give them more of me. But that wasn't always the case. There was a year when I was in bed and I couldn't move. And I went from doctor to doctor contemplating like spine surgery. And then I'm like, okay, well, I have degenerative disc disease. I might as well just wait until all of them go out and then have my spine fused and just wait it out. So, I mean, there are times where I don't get out of bed, and I think that's hard on them. And then when they have to see me in pain, that's also, another crushing thing. But for me, when I talked to my friend, she said, Alicia, look at it another way. Instead of thinking about like, oh, you could have had this job and career and all of this, and think about the blessing that you have because you actually got to spend the time with the girls. And so I do think about it that way. Even if the quality of time wasn't always that good, I did have quantity.
And do they support, do they understand lupus? Do they understand how to help and how to be a part of your story?
I think they're still learning. I think I do like my daughter masks her autism. Sometimes I just keep on going, even when I feel like, oh my gosh, I'm standing upright and at any moment I feel like I could just pass out, but I still have to do the dishes. So I'm like literally holding the ledge, washing the dishes so I can go back to bed. But they see, maybe that shows them there's strength and there's hope that no matter what happens, you can survive it. But sometimes they don't always understand. And at this point in their life, I think that they're very like me focused, and so it's just not there yet. I think that, maybe in a couple more years, they'll understand it more. But I do know that they're taking this science class, and they're learning about medications, and it was kind of interesting because I'm like, oh yeah, I've taken this or I've taken that. And so there's going to be a point where we can have better discussions, but.
Yeah. So tell me how we mentioned this at the top of the show, but tell me a little bit about your experience with Lupus LA. And I preface this by saying I don't usually use this show as an ad for Lupus LA, but I think your story is really an important part of what we do. So tell me a little bit about that experience.
Okay, so I can't even remember when I got in contact with Lupus LA, but I've always wanted to go to the Cedars-Sinai events that you guys have, like the support groups and everything, but usually it's later on at night. So I did do one video. I'm really bad. But I can't juggle everything. And usually it's like I don't know, it's like 5 or 6 p.m. And so, but I just kind of wanted to get an idea of like what was out there, because a lot of the support groups that I had been on online, it was just someone asked, well, can I catch lupus? And it was just kind of questions, which I'm fine on educating people, but sometimes I just want to, hear their problems or what medications they've taken, or be like, yeah, I can totally understand that. Like every time you do a podcast, I haven't watched all of them, but I watched some of them, and you're right. We do kind of mirror one another. It's crazy. I'm like, oh yeah, I had trauma when I was young. Oh yeah, I had issues when I was pregnant. And so Lupus LA helps me with that respect, of just being able to connect to other people. And the latest, you guys had a bowling event that I attended. Thank you so much, Lupus LA, because I met a new friend. Of course. And it was great sharing stories with her. And in addition to that, there's the grant program, and you guys helped me out, which I can't see very well because I think I do need a new prescription, but usually things happen, and it's hard to juggle everything. And especially, oh my God, during COVID, my husband was unemployed for maybe like 1.5 years or something. And it was just like, are you kidding me? After
That's tough.
Everything else, now there's like no money coming in. And so you're always so gracious to support and help in any way. Like I said, if it doesn't matter if it's an emergency grant, or if it's just to email or talk to someone, or the fun programs that you guys have, that like the bowling that you invited me to.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that, because I think it's you really have sort of embraced the services that Lupus LA provides, and clearly your lupus story is tough, and it's still tough. And I think I'm hoping that by sharing it, there are other people out there who will get the same comfort from hearing your story that you've gotten from our support groups, or from other podcasts, or other friends you've made. I love that. I love that you made a friend. So thank you so much for sharing your story. We are always here for you. And I know our audience is also going to really find this story moving and inspirational.
Thank you so much for having me, Adam. And one last thing I'd like to add is that things don't go as planned. Things change, but during the difficult times, just know that they will get better. They don't last, the symptoms don't last forever. Whatever it is you're going through doesn't last forever. So unfortunately, lupus does, but
for now. But I couldn't have said it better myself.
Yes, so thank you again. Thanks, Adam, for having me.
On behalf of the entire team at Lupus LA, we thank you for joining the Your Story, Our Fight podcast. Please tune in, spread the word, and come back for more inspiring lupus stories. I'm your host, Adam Selkowitz, wishing you good health, and to always remember, your story is our fight.